For some clients, it can be very helpful to guide them through thinking about challenging scenarios and behaviors by looking at them as a behavior change, a sequence of events that leads from some kind of triggering occurrence to a behavior through to some kind of a consequence, which could be positive or negative for the client. Let's look at two different examples where in each case we'll address an antecedent, a behavior, and a consequence. In the first case, a negative consequence is the result of this behavior chain. In this situation, your client comes home and begins fixing dinner. The client's hungry and begins snacking on chips that are sitting on the counter while preparing the dinner. When it comes time to sit with the family to eat, the client is no longer hungry. The client feels disappointed, feels that she is a poor role model for her family, sees that she's wasted food, and that she's not eating the healthy foods that she had prepared because instead she chose the less healthy chips. So you can see there those negative consequences that occurred as the result of that behavior chain. A behavior chain with a more positive consequence might look like this. Your client comes home, sees her shoes and workout clothes right by the door. She also sees fruit sitting out on the kitchen counter rather than the chips. She grabs an orange, changes her clothes, and goes for a walk. Then she prepares dinner and enjoys a healthy meal with her family. Most chains are a little bit more complicated than this, but you can see how making a change to the antecedent or the behavior can lead to very different consequences. So we can talk about strategies with our clients to change any of the steps along this behavior change. First, we can work on the antecedent through what is called cue management or stimulus control. You can describe it to your client this way. Imagine you are driving and hit a big pothole. What would you do if you were to go to the same destination again? Probably your client will suggest that he will avoid the pothole. Cue management is the same idea. It means we anticipate potential potholes on the road to meeting our wellness goals, and we are prepared to drive differently. So in this case, we'll create a strategy to counteract a cue, visualize and practice those strategies, and then explore and utilize cues that will create positive actions. Let's look at some potential antecedents and how they could be controlled. This is a very short list. There are lots of things that you could work with your client on if this is the direction that you choose to guide them in. One idea is the location for eating. Many clients will eat in a variety of locations: at the table, in front of the computer, in front of the TV, in the bed. Encouraging your clients to restructure that cue so that they choose just one location, for instance, maybe at a dining room table, and they know that is the place for eating. It's less likely that being in any of those other environments will trigger the client to choose to eat or to feel hungry. Activities. If the client focuses on only eating when eating, the client's able to be more mindful and pay more attention to what he or she is eating and not go overboard unintentionally. So encouraging that as opposed to eating while working or checking social media or watching TV can change that antecedent that will lead to the intended behavior. When grocery shopping, if the client brings along a list and plans to stick to it, or chooses not to shop while hungry, that changes the antecedent so that the behavior of purchasing the intended foods is more likely to be followed. For social environment, one idea to work on with your client is to consider how the client will handle social events, like going out to eat or a party where there will be food. So your client and you can think through reminders that they will tell themselves to make healthier choices. Perhaps if they're going out to a restaurant where they can access the menu and nutritional information ahead of time, they'll do that. They won't arrive at the party ravenous, so that it will be easier to control their behavior once they get there. Other situations include unconscious cues that impact eating behaviors. For instance, a client may not recognize that every time she starts studying, she also starts pulling out a less healthy snack. Practicing mindful eating and having a plan for what she'll reach for if she truly gets hungry can help alter the antecedent that leads to that less healthy behavior. Storage of food. If the food is out on the counter, putting healthier foods out there are more likely to lead to the behavior of choosing those foods. For less healthy foods, putting them out of sight or out of easy reach is less likely to cue the clients to start snacking mindlessly on those less healthy foods. Something else to think about in terms of storage of food is also to pre-portion snacks that the client is more likely to eat mindlessly. For instance, putting just a few cookies or a small serving or two of chips in a bag so that the client will just eat that portion is another antecedent that can lead to a healthier behavior. Sometimes when those antecedents or cues can't be accounted for, the client can think about simply changing the behavior, having a plan for following a healthier response instead of that undesired behavior in a certain situation. So, for instance, if the client tends to always reach for a less healthy food, helping the client to identify a healthier choice of a food that might seem similar. Another strategy is to plan for how the client will respond to stress or boredom or other instances in which the client often will eat or behave mindlessly. So identifying what the client will do in those situations that is not one of those less healthy behaviors can be really helpful. And there are some examples here. Can be anything from engaging in a different kind of hobby, calling a friend, getting out and getting physically active. Also, relaxation techniques can be a very healthy and helpful strategy to counter stress. One of the things that the client can do to manipulate the consequences of a behavior to kind of push a more positive consequence as a result of a healthy behavior is to give themselves some positive reinforcement in the form of rewards. Now, certain healthy behaviors can have an inherent sense of accomplishment that would be its own intrinsic reward. So we want to encourage those feelings, help the client to engage in positive self-talk, and focus on those feelings of accomplishment or the other positive consequences that might be innate in changing the behavior, such as increased feelings of energy, maybe a less stomach upset, those kinds of things. But for some clients, it can be helpful to start with tangible rewards. That could be some luxury item that they save up for or a fun experience. And perhaps they make notes of their progress and can build toward a larger reward over time. These kinds of rewards can help to get a client started on a behavior change, but as we've talked about before, you want to encourage your client to aim for autonomous motivations for the changed behavior as well, because we know those autonomous or intrinsic motivations are the ones that are going to lead to sustained behavior changes. Finally, it can be helpful to set up something of a contract with your client. Your client can actually write out their plan, and each of the steps and the behavior chain can be addressed. So what will be the healthy behavior that the client will engage in? How will they set themselves up for successfully engaging in this behavior through environmental cues or triggers? the antecedents. And finally, what kind of reward will be the positive consequence that they're aiming for. And again, that doesn't have to be something tangible. It could be the intrinsic reward of positive feelings or a sense of accomplishment, that type of thing. You don't need to set up a contract with every client. To be honest, this isn't something that I typically used with my clients, but it can be really beneficial for some clients to see that in black and white and to feel that they've made a commitment to themselves, and it can increase their sense of accountability for following through on the behavior.